Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call our meeting for the Business Technology Forum to order. We're going to defer some things because of our guests, things like the minutes and approval of the minutes to the conclusion if we have time, and move on to new business and old business at that point. But we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. For the benefit of those that are here, we're going to use microphones because it's being recorded for people to watch it later if necessary. But with no further ado, I will also ask you, those guests that we have, to please silence your phones, put them on vibrate so that they're not a disturbance to anyone else. But we'll go ahead and introduce, or let the Franklin County Recorder staff introduce themselves and their roles with the office.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out, especially on a Friday afternoon. What a great way to start your weekend. My name's TJ Brown. I'm the Franklin County Recorder. I'm joined on my right by Brian Shin, who's our compliance officer. His role is really to oversee our compliance with local, state, and federal laws, regulations, county rules. He's also been guiding our entire RFP and RFQ process, so he is the one that manages all of that for us. On my left is Jeff Nelson, who's our IT director. He manages all the technology for our office, and he's been directly involved with our systems. If it's okay, I'd really like to get an idea of who's here so I can kind of tailoring my comments appropriately. So if you could just tell me your name and who you're with, that would help.
My name is Mike Hall with Key Realty.
Okay.
Mike Trowbridge, Stewart Title Company.
Mm-hmm.
Tricia Nuttamaker with Crown Court Services.
Carol White with First American Title. Andy Harvest with Remax Impact.
Okay, great. So let me kind of go through a little bit of history, and then I'll go through the RFP process and where we are today. Our current system was installed in 1997. As I like to remind people, back in 1997, I was excited to get my first real email account that wasn't Telnet-based, and my friends and I were hoarding CDs for 100 free hours of AOL dial-up. Things have changed a little bit since then. Our vendor, prior to me taking office, Brian and I met with them in December, and they told us that they were going to stop providing service for our version of our current software. We asked them when, and they said, we don't know. We'll just tell you when we're going to stop. We said, is there a critical point where you're going to do that? And they said, when we have enough people that transition to our new system. What is that number? We can't tell you. We'll just let you know when. Okay, so we began the process of upgrading our system. The first step was to go out to bid for an RFQ, where we hired an outside consultant to evaluate our system and our internal processes. We went out to bid for that, selected Prime3SG. They've done a lot of projects in Franklin County. They're very familiar with the county's infrastructure, what we have in our data center, and how the county works. I've worked with them on several projects outside of this role as county recorder, so I was very comfortable with them. We worked with them to develop the RFP. We issued that in November of last year, actually during the Ohio Recorders Association Winter Conference. It was a 152-page RFP. We got questions from vendors for that. Eventually, we settled on 2 to bring in for live demonstrations. One vendor was Document Technology Solutions, the other was Property Info. Both vendors presented to us. Prior to that, through both the RFQ process and then for the live demonstrations, we sent out calls through the Bar Association, the Central Ohio Land Title Association, and the Columbus Realtors, as well as our website and my listserv, for people to come and watch the demonstrations. Because we really wanted to get feedback from our customers on what was going to be useful. We were obviously privy to, and my staff was privy to, who were on the selection panel, the entire RFP packet, their entire bid. That's not something that we could share. So we listened to the questions, we fielded questions through the panel for the vendors, and then came to our selection. We made our selection on February 17th. We sent our scoring packets to the Franklin County Purchasing Department, which is under the Board of Commissioners, on the 24th. And we had a meeting with the commissioners recently with their purchasing department, the Office of Management and Budget. Went over with them our whole process. They gave it their blessing, and now we're waiting for purchasing to notify the selected vendor so that we can begin contract negotiations. I say all that in that I can't share with you who we've picked. It will not become public knowledge, at least for our comment, until the agreements have been signed. The first time you'll see the vendor is on an agenda for the Franklin County Data Processing Board and then for the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. It's just the way the purchasing process works. Until the contract's been voted on by both of those entities, anyone can back out at any time. So that's where we are. What I need to find out is what's going to be important to you when you're using our website. A few things that we asked for our vendors to do. First was the ability for people to subscribe to news alerts for certain fields, for any field on which we index. So if you're looking for a specific legal description, a specific name, a specific document, and you want to know when something's been recorded on that, you can find out instantly versus going to our website 5 times a day. You want to make sure that IRS lien's been released before you go to the closing table? Great, that's an easy way to do it rather than having someone hit refresh all the time. We also want the ability to be able to save searches, to have a very user-friendly site, and to be able to have training specific to our users. So we're going to be working with our selected vendor to develop training for both title agents and real estate agents, as well as training for our staff, and we want that training to be tailored to your needs. So part of what was going to be helpful for us today is to find out what it is that you use on our website specifically that is helpful, that you want to make sure that you see training on how to do that same thing again. And then what other features you may want to see or to be trained on so that we can make sure that we have those available. And that's where I turn it over to you. For your feedback and for any questions.
Okay, so obviously just raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic. One thing that kind of started this for me, I use the site sporadically. Some of our title partners use it much more frequently than we do as realtors. And I was on there with my iPad. And that's when I actually told you, I think the next day or two after that, you know, I couldn't get to what I needed. So routinely, I will go to it to try to pull up, not necessarily liens that have been filed, but perhaps even deed restrictions, condo decks, bylaws, things of that nature, which I find very valuable and helpful in what I do, primarily because, and some of our title partners might be able to speak to this, right now that information, even though it's publicly available, it's held hostage to a greater degree by other service providers who say, if you want copies of this, you need to pay us $100 or $50, so on and so forth. So to start out with my first question, will that information be available on your site at no cost? Because I know that I've gone there before and it says, well, you can put this thing in your shopping cart maybe, but then I could click on something else and then it appeared and then I could print it. So what type of functionality can I expect going forward with the new site?
I think the functionality that you can expect with whatever system we have is going to be one where the documents that are publicly available now will still be publicly available. We would like to have, and we have to work out the ability to order certified copies online. That's something that we're going to be working out through contract negotiations if that becomes a possibility. That's where the shopping cart feature really comes into play, or if you want it printed out at our office, right? Because our charge is a lot more than if you're printing it out at home. So those condo declarations, those deed restrictions, all the things that you can get now will still be available and available for you. We won't be charging access to get onto our site. That's not something that we're allowed to do by state law. A portion of your fee when you record things already goes to our technology fund.
Okay. One more question, then I'll start with the audience. Is it compatible with Apple products? Because I happen to be on my iPad and it said you needed to download Microsoft Silverlight or something like that. And I said, well, these things don't really talk to one another. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that may be the same or what might change?
I'm going to start and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, who knows much more about IT than I do, the fine points. If you're using the new system on your iPad right now, it does have that Silverlight that you're forced to use. But you can go to the legacy view and use the older system where you're still getting all the same documents, all the stuff that we're indexing today, but that should be much more compatible. But this is where I point to Jeff.
Well, our goal is certainly to have it so that it's compatible on both platforms. The ability to make it mobile friendly is a little difficult because the documents don't necessarily lend themselves to shrinking to the size where you can actually read it. So those problems I don't think we're going to be able to overcome. But we are looking at a solution that will allow us to have like one technology across platforms that both can access and do so easily. And right now, that doesn't exist. I don't know. In '97, they didn't even have mobile applications. I have to think hard to get back to go back that far. So, and that's one of the reasons we're looking to do the upgrade and to go to a new system. But in short, we definitely want a platform that all devices are going to be able to use equally well.
Okay.
And so that when you can, because I know with the new system, if you go to the new system on the site, with the Macintoshes, sometimes you have to go through some little hoops with third-party applications to open up the image files. And we're looking at solutions that will allow us, if you have an Apple, click, boom, shows up. If you have a PC, click, boom, shows up.
And by new, you mean the newer version of the one that we have now, not one of the two vendors that we've selected.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
But we won't have any problem with the new vendor that you've selected with that kind of functionality.
That is our sincere hope, yes.
Okay. All right, well, questions from the audience?
If I never get another call saying, why is it like this, I will be happy.
Anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. I know Crown Services. Did you have a question?
Sure. And this, I'm not a power user here, so forgive my ignorance. But in any case, when you search on the web and you search for documents, I don't find it to be terribly transparent on the initial search, what you're actually looking at. So I think a better, more user-friendly way of displaying, what it is you're trying to open, and how it relates to other documents. So it's like if you're tracing back mortgages. I mean, I know like the actual system, but I'm talking about the website. As someone that's not a power user where you use it all the time, and if you're trying to look back through mortgages or whatever, then I have no idea necessarily if this mortgage belongs to that. Like where someone's refied over and over. I don't know. I don't know how they connect. And then the codes are great. I think that each of the documents has like a code, but unless you go try to find somewhere where that code is, and I've not always been successful at figuring out where those codes are kept. I don't know necessarily what I'm looking at there either. But again, probably not your target audience and power user, but.
Well, but anybody, the site's not designed. I don't know that it's designed specifically for title agents or realtors, but quite honestly, my grandmother should be able to go on there and look something up. So simplicity at the, I don't know if we want to say highest or lowest level, for us as professionals, realtor professionals and affiliates, we certainly have a knowledge that's probably beyond the average citizen, but it should be set up so that the average citizen should be able to go to it as well and find their mortgage that they filed, so on and so forth. And it can really be a resource rather than having, there are scams out there now where they're saying, get an official copy of your title. You know what I mean? Different things like that. Somebody shouldn't be afraid to be able to just go to this website. Wouldn't that be amazing? A great thing to provide for our community if everybody from the lowest common denominator, for lack of a better term, could go to this site, access it. So what I would encourage you to do is to see if you can pull up an example now so that they can identify it exactly and say, yeah, I think a good way to kind of tweak that or make it more accessible or easier to read, give them some specific examples on some things that might be able to be improved. Next question. I want Crown's.
How many questions? We had two people that attended your
Demonstration.
Yeah, the demonstrations. And so they kind of kept me apprised of what was going on. So I just kind of in here just to see what you're going to say today, and I thought maybe disclose who it was.
I really wish I could, and I honestly wish that we were further ahead than what we are, but that part was out of our control. I will say that going back to Wayne's comment and to what you said, our goal is to have it usable for everybody on the level that they need it. You know, if you're doing a whole title search, you want to see a lot more information than what somebody else does. So we really want to get to a place, whether it's immediately when it's released or as the system progresses, to where people can tailor what they're seeing and how they're seeing it to their needs. So it's a little more personalized and less dependent on, you know, calling the recorder's office to say, what in the world does all of this mean? Now, at the same time, we also don't want to oversimplify it so that people feel that they don't need to do title searches anymore. That's important to us. We still want people doing their title searches, and we still want them protecting themselves as much as possible.
Will the site online be exactly what you guys have in the office?
Not what you see today, but we will be using the same interface for both, right? We'll be using the same interface as far as public sectors go for both. That's what we decided, right? I believe whether you're online or you're in our office, that you'll be using the same interface.
Okay.
So it's because right now, if you've ever been down to our office and you've searched on one of our computers, it's a totally different interface. It's a specific module, specific for public access. It will be the same thing, so that you're seeing the same thing whether you're at home, in your office, or in our office.
So the columns that you have, you can rearrange and then save that format, so the next time you go in, it'll be exactly those things again, or will it?
That will be one of the things that we're working out through contract negotiations on users creating their own profiles, logins, and saving their preferences. How quickly that becomes an available feature will be part of our contract negotiations, whether that's available on day one or day whatever, but that's something that we'll keep everyone apprised of. Now, if you just go on and you sign up as a guest, no, it's going to go to whatever we default it to, which is how it works now.
Is that something that you think would be helpful to have that available almost immediately, so you would categorize that as a priority?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions?
Brian's got something to
Let me just give you one other point that Terry didn't add earlier. The timeline for implementation. I think that's important for everybody to understand. Regardless which of the two finalists that we end up moving forward with, and again, it's confidential, and it's just because Ohio law makes it confidential until the contract negotiations are finalized, because either party could walk away. And then, of course, if the first one it's not successful, then we're obviously going to look at the second one. So that's why at this point we can't reveal anything. But the timeline's important. We are looking at a 6-month implementation. So it's not like we're going to sign the contract and then a month later it's going to be working. Our goal, if I may share, is to have the new system in place, up and running in December, so that we can pull the plug on the old one and transition at the end of 2015. So starting in January 2016, we will have the changeover. That's our timeline. That's our goal. Right now we're being patient with the purchasing department. I know they're very busy, and so I think that's important to understand. And in the interim, we're going to be working on all these features that we want to make sure that you all have, that you're used to, that you use all the time, especially the title companies, because you're not your once in a while users. You're the everyday users. So we're very sensitive to that.
The other thing is, too, we have to have the full system up and running by December 31st so that we don't have to pay another $50,000 for a maintenance contract for a system that we're going to be getting rid of. Everyone likes to say $50,000.
Did you find?
So, I mean, I know people aren't going to be able to see the detail of this, but I think it illustrates, the point. So I just searched myself here. So, maybe I'm not the normal case because I've bought and sold too many properties. Yeah, so, and I tried the whole Silverlight thing. I'm on a Mac here, so that I've never been able to get the Silverlight to actually do, I think, what it's supposed to do. So, again, maybe it's my own ignorance. But it's like looking through this stuff, and I'm on the summary. I mean, there's these codes. Who knows what that code means? I mean, if I go on the detail data, it tells me. I guess my general point is I don't think this is organized well, and maybe on the new version it's organized better. And then how each of these items relate to one another is not transparent to me. you know, there's a mortgage recorded, you know, I refied, you know, what, like 2 or 3 years ago. So, but they're like date order. How do I even figure out like where that mortgage and where the release of the mortgage, and so the general point is, if this is just, and I hate to use the auditor site because that's not perfect either. But I think the way the auditor's information is organized is so much clearer and cleaner to read than any of this. So, and maybe that's already been fixed. And I don't want to.
I will say that the way our system works is the only way you're going to get a direct link between documents is if someone does a marginal notation, which means that the easiest example is when you're filing a mortgage release. So when the bank files the mortgage release, they're going to reference the initial mortgage. That gets keyed in as a marginal notation, and it links the two documents so you can go back and forth. But it does bring up the other point of, yes, we do want it to be better organized. We want people to be able to customize how they're viewing it, but we also want to be able to have the training specific so that when you're looking at it, you know what you're looking at. Because we may need to go into more detail in certain fields in a training for realtors than for title search companies, or for people who are helping to manage their parents' house. And we're going to have those types of trainings available, and we're also going to be working with our vendor to be able to have some of those videos online. So if you need a refresher course, or you get somebody who's waiting before we have another training available, they can watch that. And
my exact point is, I think it's a matter of semantics and calling it marginal versus what a layman may understand. What that word means. I think that's the biggest thing. I've done a lot of like web development and design, user interface, and I think that's the biggest thing is you have to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator, and that's probably the lowest common denominator.
Well, you raise a good point, Wayne, and one of the points, and this is kind of right up my alley as a lawyer, is that we are kind of stuck with the revised code. And the revised code calls things certain things. And in order for us to be compliant, we have followed that practice. No county recorder in Ohio, even in the smallest of county, is still going to the books and making a manual notation that, oh, this mortgage was released on such and such date. But we're kind of stuck to a certain extent by what the law is. And one of our hopes is that the finalist will have the most usability, the most customization possible. One thing that you see on some websites, we might have codes, but sometimes on certain websites, if you hover over something, it'll give you more detail. And that is certainly a feature that we would love to have in this new system, that even though we're calling a release an REL, and to all of us in this room, we'd probably figure that one out pretty quickly. But if I'm a John or Jane citizen of Franklin County, I may not know what an REL is. But if I can hover over with my mouse and maybe get more information, I think that would address some of the concerns that you're raising about, the presentation to the public. And we're very sensitive to that. And like TJ said before, in contract negotiations with whichever one, we're going to make sure that the interface is as user-friendly as possible.
And to what extent at that point will, as you're designing that interface, usually when you're designing a web interface or software, the users are part of that development. So at what, will there be an ongoing input from groups that are regularly using the system?
So as we roll out the system, because I can tell you it's not going to be all of a sudden people walk into the recorder's office and it's a brand new day and there's a brand new computer system. We're not going to flip a switch like that. We're going to be doing soft rollouts, and we're going to be asking people for input. So that's where it's important to get engaged with our office. Give me your email address so I can put you on our internal office-based listserv, so that this feature's out there. Come and take a look at it and give us your feedback. And that's something that we're all very conscious of. I've gone through system implementations and upgrades through various offices that I've worked in. But the other thing that we need to do, going back to what you were saying, is that put in mind that we actually need to have sort of a glossary. this is what this term is and this is what it means, and really be able to define it for people, and even something that they could just print off and hold it, keep at their desk and keep in a little file folder or tack up to their pegboard and be able to look at it when they need it. So that's something that we'll work on to develop. But yeah, we are going to be asking for input as we go through the process, knowing that we're not going to get every change immediately. And it may be that you get to A and B by going here, but now you need to just adjust a little bit and go to here because that's the confines of the system, but we want to make that clear. So that you're not saying, well, I used to be able to get this before and now it's just not there anymore. No, it's still going to be there, but how do we get to that, and how, because our staffs, we're all going to have to train ourselves internally too, right, on how do we get from A to B now. And that's going to be something that we're going to want to work on.
I think that so as a realtor community, we embrace change, but easy transition or the simplicity of change. So those educational bubbles, maybe even the intuitive, oh, it looks like you're trying to do this, consider whatever, to kind of redirect us on whatever the filing may be that was once in place X and now it's in place Y. Mm-hmm. That kind of bubble that hovers over, or as you hover the mouse over that section to say, looks like you're trying to do this, and maybe they're not. But again, computer systems, as I talk to the IT man, are genius sometimes, and they can kind of guess what you're trying to do. And if we can contemplate that, and people can easily transition and understand whether it's glossary, etc., that would be very helpful. So I would say that that's a pretty high priority. What we'd also like to perhaps put in place for the benefit of the association would be to create Colin, who didn't have an opportunity to introduce himself, but he's our staff liaison to this committee, Colin Finan, and we're also working with another politician who's developed a new website, and we have a direct contact, so I don't know if Jeff is the appropriate person. Colin could field concerns as changes come about, or even after today's presentation, as concerns come about from various members. He can take those and maybe filter and be one point of contact instead of you having a call or an email from 6,000 members. Maybe you're just getting one list of 100 items, hopefully not 100, but a certain number of items from Colin, and you can better address them. You're both in the IT field, and maybe there's some discernment that can happen that Wayne and I may not understand as lay people, so to speak.
And that's one thing that we've discussed, and I've discussed with Jeff, and I've discussed with Brian, is how we're going to manage this process. And I think one thing that we've talked about trying to do, and we just have to see if our county infrastructure will allow us to do it, we have, and we've put it out on our monitors in our office, a general help desk for all of our IT issues that goes through sort of a help desk queue, and then Jeff and his team prioritize them and deal with those issues and sort of tick them off of their list, and then people also get feedback when they can respond directly to them from the help desk. And we're talking about trying to develop a process like that that'll be very similar, so that it's so that Jeff sees it and I see it and Brian sees it and our consultant sees it, and Stacy Baker, who's our operations manager, who's also helping us with this project as part of the scoring team, so that we all see it and that we're all addressing them together. So that's something, whether it's something that goes specifically to Jeff or something that comes through the help desk, that'll be very helpful. But yeah, if you guys will save us a ton if we can have a central point of contact. And that doesn't mean that if someone emails us and says, oh, I'm having this issue, we're not going to say, well, you have to go through this person. We'll still try to help them out as much as possible, but we'll also try to encourage them to go back through the channel that the association set up. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think as an association, it's our responsibility to help service our members and make sure that they have information available. So again, if Colin has seen one question 12,000 times, he's going to be able to address it perhaps right then because he's already had a conversation, or he has clarification on the process or how something's changing, or even when a change is expected to take place. So we're happy to work collectively with you as an association, and again, I would designate Colin as our point of contact for that specifically.
And as we're getting those questions too, we can work on developing collectively, not to speak for Jeff, but sort of a frequently asked questions process list as we're going through the process. So if we're getting a bunch of questions on when is this going to happen, well, we can put that up there and people can go to that. So then maybe Colin can point people to that first, and we can point people to that first, so that we're trying to streamline the process for people.
Perfect.
wanted to add just one point. I know we're talking today about what the potential for the new system is, but it does bring to mind an important point, and that's if you have any trouble with the current system, we have 4 guys in our customer service department who are wonderful. They are some of our longest term employees. They were there back in the days of the books and before the computers, and they're extremely helpful, especially for just members of the public who call in with questions about what is this document? You know, how do I find something? I keep track of statistics for the budget purposes of all the calls, the emails, believe it or not, still faxes, and walk-ins. And while they are not allowed to practice law, of course, I've beat that into their heads, no unauthorized practice of law in the recorder's office under my review, and they're also not looking to take the place of title companies, of course, either. We're not doing free title searches for the public. But in terms of helpful information, they're there. They are extremely nice, extremely friendly, and very helpful, even when the public isn't always as friendly and helpful with them. The other point is going through this process is going to be very nice for us because everybody's going to get trained on the new system so that everyone in our office will be an expert on the new system, and everyone in our office will be able to answer questions about the system once we've all been trained.
Well, I've heard a couple times for you guys to say you're not trying to replace the title company, and I'm certainly not either. Your job, title searching is only one element of your job. It's not the only element. Your job is to provide clear and perfect title and title insurance in the event that something comes up at some point in the future. So I think that in many cases, 2 closings today and my buyers and sellers respectively paid for recording. They should have access to that information. So it's not necessarily a replacement of a title agency, but access to what's made available to the public. They're a service provider that simply does a more in-depth search and provides title insurance in many cases for the information that's been found. Not a replacement, but again, for the lowest common denominator, I want to see the website functional. I want to see it usable for my grandmother, if she so chooses to go on the website. I'd like to hear a little bit. I wasn't privileged to go to the meeting that you all had with maybe Crown Title or Crown Search Services or anybody. Was there anything relevant that you think might be helpful for us to know here from some of your preliminary meetings?
I mean, I think a lot of the feedback that we got, it's been throughout this entire process. The first is make sure that we can do what we do. Nobody wants to all of a sudden not be able to find deeds, and that's been, or liens. They want to make everyone wants to know that when we switch over that nothing's going to get missed, that all of a sudden we're not going to have a gap in data or we're not going to have a gap in images. That is going to be very important for us as well. One thing that we will do that we'll be working out through contract negotiations, in the contract for the RFQ, which is our consultant to help us through this process, they don't get paid until certain milestones are met. So that's going to be one of the bargaining chips that we're going to be using throughout our process with this as well. And when we go through contract negotiations, that's one of the things that Brian's really going to be focusing on is there are milestones, and unless the vendor's meeting them, they're not getting paid. So know that we'll have that stick and that carrot at the same time. But the common theme has always been my door's always open, my phone's always open, my email's always open. I'm there more than I'm not. You can, to the chagrin of some of my staff, I'm always there, you can always find me. My staff's there, you can always find them. If you have a problem, don't wait to come to us. And that's really been important for me to communicate with everyone. If you have a problem, let us know immediately, because then we can address it. If you sit on it and it festers and you're still frustrated, you're going to be banging your head against the wall, and I don't want you doing that. If you go to a member of my staff and you don't get the answer that you want, escalate it. If you want to call me directly, call me directly. It may be a situation like today where I say, I don't fully understand that, I'm going to have Jeff answer that question, or I'm going to have Brian answer that question. That's fine, but then I have an alert there on my computer that's reminding me to follow up and make sure that you got the answer that you wanted. So for us, and I think that's been the common theme, is that there is an open avenue of communication, and that we're going to work our hardest to keep that going in both directions.
Okay, thank you. Matt Warren, our senior trainer, has come in. I don't want to put him on the spot. I'm sure he has some questions that he's probably been faced with from some of our other Realtor members. He's also been an instrumental part in the auditor's transition, helping us as an association, kind of what I've designated Colin to do on the recorder side. Would you like to speak to anything specifically, Matt, if there are any kind of things that overlap, things that you might be expecting to look differently? And you and I have sat in a couple of those meetings together, so I'll just open it up to you. And we're recording this, so we want to use the mic.
Oh, okay, thank you. Boy, I just walked in and I'm totally blind on this. I honestly don't have anything specific. Colin, did you already talk, or did you have anything specific you wanted to talk about? No, absolutely, and that's we've been dealing with a lot of the issues on the auditor's website, and I'm a lot more familiar with that than I am with the recorder side, honestly. I do not have any specific questions, unfortunately, but I do thank you for coming. I wish I could have been here earlier. I couldn't make it until now, but.
Have you been faced with any specific questions from our membership that, as you've seen some of the transitions with the auditor site, have you been faced with questions that might be pertinent for this transition as we anticipate the transition for the recorder site?
One thing, we use auto population of tax data that it goes through a CoreLogic vendor software, but the recorder data we don't interface directly with, obviously, but we do with the auditor side. I guess from our members' point of view, we don't go out of our way to push people to the recorder's data to look things up. I guess I'd be curious to ask from you, what should we be pushing our members to go out there in lieu of going to the auditor's site? I mean, what from the realtor's point of view, what should they be going to your site for first?
That's a very good question. And when I bought my house, I was very familiar with county documents. I started my career in the county treasurer's office, specifically with delinquent properties. So I spent a lot of time looking up information on people's houses to try to figure out where things were. I would first, if I'm going to start looking up a property for a client, I would look up to see how many mortgages are on the property, see if they're released. If you want to be in a stronger negotiating position, I would look to see if you have any ARMs that are coming up. If you're about ready to have a big balloon payment, see what those deadlines are. When I purchased my house, the seller had an adjustable rate that was going to kick in 45 days after we started negotiations. That was very beneficial for me from a negotiating perspective. You also want to know if you can get an idea of any liens. I mean, nothing's gonna satisfy the ability of having a preliminary search done on the title. But just a very cursory glance is going to tell you a couple things. You may not find everything if you're not overly familiar with our site, but you know enough to be dangerous. Also, it should be able to tell you who the current owner is. Okay. We have seen schemes, especially further out west, where people have transferred properties into their. Well, a scheme that we were made aware of with the Ohio Recorders Association, and it started out west and it's inching its way here. Someone finds an elderly property owner that has no liens, no mortgages on their property. They file a false quitclaim deed, put it in their name, take out a mortgage, never make a payment on the mortgage. Mortgage company obviously is going to start foreclosing. All of a sudden, grandma's without a house. So two things. One, obviously, you want to make sure that the person who says they own it, but the alerts that we've talked about for our website, where you can sign up to get alerts for your own property or for properties of family members. So if you want to watch out for your grandmother's property, you can do that to make sure that no one's filing one of these things against them. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach.
I just thought of another question with the CoreLogic software that we use for tax record auto population. One of the things they display is mortgage data. And unfortunately, with the way they collect the data, they only show the origination of the mortgage. They don't show the satisfaction of the mortgage. And they can't see the percentage of mortgage, that's been paid off. is any of that information available, or is it the same?
So you're not going to be able to see the status of the mortgage and how far it is in completion. What you would be able to find is through the cross-reference or the marginal notations if a satisfaction was filed. So if you have the instrument number for the mortgage, 1999, 03, 02, et cetera, et cetera. If you search by that instrument number, which you can do on the legacy site, you can't do that on the new site, it'll pull up anything that has that cross-reference in it, which means that you should get the satisfaction if there was one filed. But Jeff understands a little bit more on the core logic and stuff like that and how that would work from tapping into our system, apparently.
Tapping in,
Or being able to do that type of search through what they're talking about. Does that make sense?
yeah, I don't, to get the auto population from ours right now, there's not any mechanism set up. If, we've talked and discussed, interfacing with other different agencies, and in the future, that's something that, we'd like to look to see, about pursuing, but currently, you can only do through the marginal notations and things like that to cross-reference anything with the system as it stands now.
That I think it will still be useful to our members to point them in that direction, because since there's no hope for getting the satisfaction of the mortgage on Realist, because the way they accumulated, they don't have that at all. But what you're saying, if they go into your site now, you said the new site doesn't do it yet, or is never going to do it.
Well, the new site is we have our legacy site and we have our new site.
Right.
The new site is a preview of what the upgrade from the legacy site is going to be.
Okay.
So it's something that they implemented. It was in 2010. Yeah, during the last administration, in preparation to give people an idea, and I guess to get feedback from the community as to how they were going to like it. So when we talk about the new site, when we say here the new site, we're not talking about the new document management system we're looking to implement as a result of the RFP process. We're talking about the new search site because that's what it's called. Yeah, it's the new search site that uses Silverlight.
Okay, so you're just talking about a front end. The database is the same for both.
Right.
Okay,
right
so they can go to the legacy site and still get fresh data that is being updated all the time.
The legacy site is not legacy data. It's legacy site only because it was implemented in the 90s.
Gotcha. Okay,
So
that's
all still current data.
That's useful, because that's something that we can tell people that, if you're looking for the mortgage information, even if they're looking at the mortgage information on CoreLogic and they want to verify what that is, because sometimes it's kind of vague. It'll say warranty deed. It won't determine exactly what that was. And some of the ways they don't report short sales directly, they do a calculation to see if it sold for less than the first position mortgage. And so going to the legacy site and looking at that and trying to find the satisfaction of those mortgages might be very useful as a verification tool for that.
Right.
Okay, but that's good to know. They need to go to the legacy search,
It's not legacy data. It's legacy site.
Sure, absolutely.
So-
It's an important distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
And you're doing a specific instrument number search.
Okay.
And that will, but you have to know the first instrument number in order to get to it.
Right. Now, is there? I'm trying to think right now, honestly, on the Realist data that we have. I don't know if the instrument number shows up right on the detail for that loan. How could they match that loan with Fifth Third Bank on this date to the records in your system? And get the because I'm assuming they'd have to go to your legacy data to get the instrument number, or do they have to start with the instrument number?
I can get you to that, but do you want to try this one, or do you want me to walk through?
Searching by name. So you'd search by name, and that's on the legacy search. Both systems, on either one of the interfaces, they'd search by name within a month range. Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way to get it.
Right, but then also double check that legal description to make sure it's for the property that you want. There are a lot of Terry Browns in Franklin County.
Sure, absolutely. You need physical location. You need to verify the physical location.
Right, and if someone has more than one property, you have someone that owns multiple properties, you want to make sure that it's the exact one that you're looking at.
Okay.
I get a lot of calls from the public I try to be as helpful as I can, again, without actually giving them legal advice. But I think one important point that the public doesn't understand, and having, most people don't realize that our site is not searchable by address. That's a huge distinction between the recorder site and the auditor site. Under Ohio law, there's a unique parcel number that each real estate tract has. We do index by that if they put it in the document. That would be the link between the recorder's site and the auditor's site. That parcel number is going to be the same. But most John or Jane public, they go to the auditor's site, they look up, my address is 137 Morse Road, they're going to find it. Our site, you're going to have to search by Brian Shin. And if I'm not the only Brian Shin in Franklin County, you're going to have to figure out which one I am. So that's a very important distinction. Our site is only by the legal or by the names of the grantor or the grantee.
No, I mean, because we don't always get the address on the documents. The addresses can change. The only thing that is consistent is the legal description. Even parcel numbers are going to change over time. You have combines, you have splits. People get very confused with 80/90s. The legal description is really where you want to go. So you want to know the lot and the subdivision.
And I had one other thing. In response to Matt's question, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, a mortgage is a private contractual relationship between a lender and a person borrowing the money. There's no legal requirement that any update ever get filed on that except the release. But one thing that I've learned in my time in the recorder's office is there can be some kind of good hints that things are not going so well, and that would be liens. You look for liens on the property, tax liens especially. The state of Ohio, the IRS, they're going to want to get their money. If you start noticing liens on the property, you're going to know that there's some problems, and that's probably someone who is also facing other issues. And that's where it's important to look at other websites like the Clerk of Courts. Obviously, if there's a foreclosure action, you're going to have to go to Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy, Franklin County Clerk of Courts website to look for that. But unfortunately, that kind of data never gets filed with us until the case is concluded and then a transfer takes place.
Okay, thank you. So, Matt, you brought up a good point, and Colin and I had started talking about it. We hire with we engage third-party service providers to provide us with data from the county. Is there anything specific, you had talked about mortgage satisfaction, is there anything specific that other than that you think we would maybe need to have some kind of a link so that we get the information? Because my concern with that is the lag in information. I'm hearing sometimes 6 to 8 months behind. Well, that's almost a year. Not from you specifically,
okay.
but from third-party service providers telling us that they're not getting updates, to give us the valid information. So again, my question would be to Colin or to Matt, is there any sourceable information other than maybe a satisfaction of mortgage that we might look for to create some kind of, and maybe this would be a development opportunity so that we develop something that would be new and cutting edge. You have a link that you provide information directly to Columbus Association of Realtors or Columbus Realtors.
Right off the top of my head, one of the things that the CoreLogic system currently does is have a reverse link that on their detailed report on their side, they have a link back by parcel number. And I don't know, is that something that we could deep link into your system from CoreLogic, or even from the MLS system is linked somehow? Pretty much everything we do is based on the parcel number from the MLS to Realist for the auditor's site. But is that something we could also link back? But as you're pointing this out, I'm thinking about the name. Is there a way you could interface the name and situs or physical location address and look it up that way? I mean, is that something possible that we could deep link into the auditor's record directly?
I'm not
auditor. Excuse me, recorder. We're already doing the auditor's record,
right. But I'm gonna start this and I'm gonna pass it over to Jeff because it'd be the same thing I tell him in his ear right now. The auditor in their old system, and I was told recently that this link was broken, so the auditor is actually working on fixing it. What they would do is on the left-hand side, you could click on Recorder Document Search, and what it would do is automatically execute a search through the legacy side of our system by name. So that seems like something that you're talking about, basically being able to build by doing a search that's happening in the background by name or parcel ID or legal description. So Jeff would have to tell you if that's something that you could build to do in our site.
In our system. I would like to say yes. That would a lot of how we would end up doing that would be dependent upon the vendor that we go with. The one that we've selected, we think would be open to doing that kind of customization. The other issue would be having to set up with the county how outside queries would be coming in that far into our system.
Right.
And but I mean, technology is technology. Yeah. The technology, usually I find the technology can do it. It's rules, laws, and everything else that kind of preclude that. But that would and I think as we establish an email and correspondence, we can start to get these kind of ideas and inputs and set up. We're working right now on finishing up an internal SharePoint site to be able to track these kind of things, and it would be really helpful.
Okay, that's one thing we currently don't have in our MLS system is owner name. I know a lot of other MLSs around the country actually do put owner name right on the report. That would be one place where we might consider putting that link. This is spitballing. This is not anything we've actually talked about, but I think it's good that Michael brought it up, because I could definitely see, as we talked about with the mortgage information, it sounds like you guys would give, if we could link that way, would be a great resource for them to say, okay, I can't figure out what this realist information means with the mortgage. Click the link and it pulls up that owner name with all of their mortgage information, and they could just look through it. That would be a great service if that's something that could be incorporated.
But the way the auditor search works right now is you're getting many more results than what you need.
Right.
It's not drilled down as much as if you would do it yourself. Right. So what might be beneficial is a two-prong approach. One where you have that ability if we're able to do that, but a stronger approach I think might be to if we can actually start showing people very simply how to execute those searches on their own.
Sure.
But yes, if it's all one source and it's coming through, that's going to be a lot easier.
Sure.
And also, I mean, right now the current system is SQL backend, and I'm pretty sure regardless of who we go with, it's still going to be SQL backend. So, technologically, I would think the only thing stopping us would be how we could secure, that connection and the queries. So,
I guess to kind of piggyback what he's saying, on the realtor side, I know from being in title how to go find the deed, spelling, who's actually in title. I know that. But it'd be really cool from the MLS site, when Realist pulls up, it gives us the last deed of record. If we could click on that deed, the realtors could click on that deed and go to that picture of it, because that would help them the realtors who don't know how to go on and search for that information, because that's something that I find very valuable at a listing, to have the last deed. Who is this person? Are you these people? Where are they? That sort of thing. But it'd be nice if from that MLS site, if we could somehow link to, when they click that last deed of record, it would pop to the recorder site and pull up the image, and that would be very helpful, I think, for realtors, like I said, who don't know how to use the sites, but would find it valuable to have that deed before the listing.
And I just want to piggyback on that a little bit. And Matt and Colin, maybe you can help me. I don't think, and I could be wrong, that CoreLogic is doing all of that research in the background and then creating a file. I think all of their things are linking to, and am I right or wrong? Creating a file with the information. So, for example, where we have the information about the last mortgage of record, and you're saying it currently goes to the deed, last deed recorded?
Show you all the deeds from, like every transfer, it'll show you a bunch of them, but it'd be nice to click on it and look at it. I mean, I know how to go in and find it, but not every realtor does that. So they can click on that and pop into the recorder site and actually see the actual deed or the information. I don't know how it pulls.
And that's my question. If we're saying that 137 Morse Road, for example, has a legal description, and a grantor and a grantee's name and an instrument number, how sure are we if a parcel split or if any kind of change occurred, how sure are we that CoreLogic, and I'm going to assume that the data is 100% reliable. I mean, what mechanism are they using? Are they creating a new file for 137? Because again, nothing at the recorder site is based on 137. So how are they actually tagging that information? Is it a behind-the-scenes search that happens when we click the button? Or is it already a file that they've kind of created that they've done further research to put all of the things for 137 Morse Road, grantor, grantee, parcel number? They've researched all of those elements and said, oh, well, this fits in, this is the piece of the puzzle that fits here. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and I'll be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I won't say they're secretive, but they're very proprietary about the way they collect information. They're everything they do is proprietary. They have their own, the way they handle the records, and they don't even disclose to us where they get all of the information. Some of they're getting from the auditor and from you, and other sources we don't even know, because the data is not the same as what is recorded on the auditor's website. Because sometimes the auditor will have incorrect information and it's already been updated in whatever data they're using on Realist. Now the opposite happens too. They've got data that's wrong and the auditor has the correct information, but the point being they've got sources we don't know about, and they're proprietary data sources that we don't have access to. That said, that's where, like, for example, I don't even know where they get the data about their mortgages. I don't know whether they're collecting it from, do you have, for example, a data dump that you offer to vendors, and they could very well be using that?
There are several vendors that do have standing data dump requests that they pull from our FTP site.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I wouldn't consider what they have 100% reliable, because there are times, a sheriff sale is a great example. We've had several instances where the sheriff sale has been completed, the sheriff filed the deed with our office, and then the court ordered that deed stricken from the record because the mortgage company and the homeowner came to a deal at the 13th hour and they backed everything out. Well, if the person who has our data dump has the old deed still in their system and they haven't updated it, you're still going to see that deed, and you're going to think that John and Jane Smith no longer own the property. So that's where I would always, when you want that ultimate reliability, you know, if you want to make sure that that condo doc is the most recent one, if you pay for a title search, because they're going to go to our site. I mean, you're not going to use one of the companies that's getting data dumps from us, are you? No, they're going to come to our site because our site's the official record.
I would almost lean toward that that's what they're doing then, because one of the things that they report is the sheriff's sale, for example. They report an auction, and they state that they're not going to always see that the auction actually happened. And then they just do this 3-month thing that after it's scheduled on the courthouse steps, it automatically removes from the system, assuming that it happened. So it sounds like they're using the data dump is what it sounds like. And they're not able to verify all of them, so they just put that 3-month catch-all to say, clear them out because we don't know what happened. So yeah, it sounds like that is exactly what's being done.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the other documents and such, they've looked up documents for us, including mortgages that were taken out. We had an instance where an agent was speaking with their client, and their client was vehement that they didn't have a mortgage with a certain bank, and they were able to produce a PDF document. We could see that document, that mortgage existed at one point, but it had been satisfied, and since they don't report satisfaction, the client had honestly forgotten they ever took out the loan. So where they got that document, I mean, is that something they could get from your site? Could they actually get a PDF of the document, or would they have had to contact the originator?
Unless the court orders the removal of a document from our record, it always stays on there.
Okay.
So even a satisfaction won't take the mortgage off the record.
Okay.
What they would have been lacking then was the satisfaction.
Right.
You can find any mortgage on our website.
Okay. So they may have been their research, was just to go directly to your site and pull up that document.
Right, and
Okay.
then what they should have done is cross-reference by the instrument number for the mortgage.
Sure. Now, let me ask you this: if if that document is, well, I guess no, that answers the question, because they could have just gone out and done a search for that instrument number, found that document, and then downloaded that document specifically. Is that group of documents for each of those included in the data dump, or is there a file dump, or is it just the data?
Jeff, what goes through?
The only thing that what we throw up on the FTP site for these companies are simply the images themselves.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, no data. It's just, well, I mean, all the data is within the image, but that's all that we throw up there.
The image, including the actual mortgage, that would, like the paper I was just talking about.
Well,
would have
every
been there.
document that's recorded.
Okay.
So
Okay.
oh yeah, with the exception of DD-214s,
Okay.
living wills, and healthcare power of attorneys.
Okay.
Those we
Okay.
do not put up.
Okay.
But all of the documents that are available to the public, and we just do a data dump for the day's images once we know that that day's been completed, and zip them and throw them up on the FTP site.
Okay. So they may well have already had that if they use the FTP.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they're going to be doing their own data entry.
Right. That's one thing that we are fully aware of, is they're doing a bunch of data scrubbing once they receive the public data, because that's where all the tying together comes from. And I assume they're just taking the data dumps from the auditor and the recorder and tying it all together somehow on their system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I would just say again, did you have another question? If there's a way between Jeff, Matt, Colin, that you can identify opportunities to get direct access to information, we'd welcome the opportunity, I think. Stan Collins, our CEO, just stepped in, so again, I don't want to step too far into it, but again, the sooner we can have accurate information, I think it's better for our membership. So if any of the three of you can think of some technological way of creating, it would, in my mind, it's one additional element of information, and to TJ's point, you'd have to dig deeper. You know what I mean? You have to drill down to, if something says Terry Brown, well, you got to look through 750 of them that may be in Franklin County and see which one. How do you take that next step in a search automatically that maybe includes an initial or a junior or even a district for a parcel number? Because I'm sure you guys have some parcel numbers, but not all the time. But that next piece of information that gives us a further link, so that we don't have 750, but maybe we have 7 to 10. Even something like that, because when we as realtors pull up information for Terry Brown, we have to filter through, well, which one is it? You know what I mean? We have to do that to some extent, but if this search can make some additional link for us so that we have a little bit more information, accurate information, and more up to date. Again, it would be my primary concern. Colin, did you have anything that you wanted to add? And then we'll ask Stan if he had any questions since he just stepped in. Okay.
I can't say I've got any questions. I apologize.
Okay. It's okay.
The one thing I will say is, once again, the search that you do or that the buyer or seller does is never going to take the place of the very thorough search that the title companies are going to do. With that in mind, know that when a document comes in, as soon as that receipt's issued, there's at least one name on each side of the transaction that's indexed, and those are searchable. You're not going to see the image yet, but they're searchable then. Once it's gone through scanning and data entry and quality assurance, then you're going to have all of the names indexed, and you're going to have the image available. So, there might be a timing where you get one side, one name, but you don't get the other because you're only looking for one name out of a couple. You're not looking for both of them. So that could be an instance. Okay. And I will say that our timing now is much better. A few years ago when I came in, our average time was 3 to 5 business days. We're now in 1 to 2 business days of having everything completed. So know that when someone comes in and files something with us, we're getting it done in 1 to 2 business days, where the image is available and all the names are indexed.
Well, I think we've covered the items that you had on the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any additional questions before we conclude with our guests? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
We will look hopefully for Jeff and Colin to have a direct connection via email. You guys can exchange cards. Stan and Matt, what I had suggested where Matt's kind of our liaison with the auditor's office. Colin can be with the recorder's office as they endeavor to complete this new website and can be our one point of contact from a Realtor Association standpoint to get those answers to those various questions. So with that being said, thank you very much for taking the time to come today, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. We look forward to it as well.
Thank you.